At my son's company launch party, they sat me at a folding table near the kitchen entrance. Not the kind of entrance where guests arrive, the kind where the catering staff comes in and out carrying trays. I noticed it right away, hard not to. Every other table in that banquet hall had white linen, candles, little place cards with names written in gold ink. My table had a paper centerpiece and 2 folding chairs that squeaked every time someone sat down. The other chair stayed empty most of the night. My son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, even now, had started his investment firm 3 years earlier. I'd helped him, not with money. I didn't have much of that. But I'd driven him to meetings when his car broke down. I'd watched his dog for 2 weeks when he flew to Chicago to close his first deal. I'd listened to him practice his pitch at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, while I sipped decaf and tried to keep my eyes open. Little things. The kind of things fathers do that nobody puts in a press release. The party was his idea. A grand opening celebration, he called it. New office space downtown, 40 employees, clients flying in from out of state. I ironed my best shirt the night before, the blue one with the small check pattern that my late wife had bought me for our anniversary about 12 years back. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time trying to decide if I looked respectable enough. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years working maintenance at a paper mill outside of Akron. My hands are rough. My shoes aren't fancy. My car is a 2009 Chevy Malibu with 212,000 miles on it and a crack in the dashboard that I've been meaning to fix since the Obama administration. I know what I am. I've never pretended to be something else. My daughter-in-law met me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She's always been polite to me in the way that people are polite to someone they're tolerating. Perfectly measured. Just warm enough that you can't call it cold. "Dad," she said, and hugged me quickly. "We're so glad you could make it." She took my coat and handed it to someone and then steered me through the room with her hand lightly on my back, the way you might guide an elderly man across a busy street. I saw my son across the room in a dark navy suit, laughing with a group of men in expensive-looking clothes. He glanced over, raised his hand in a little wave, and went back to his conversation. My daughter-in-law brought me to the table by the kitchen entrance. She pointed to one of the squeaky chairs and said something about how the seating had been a little complicated and how they'd wanted to make sure I was comfortable. Then someone called her name from across the room, and she was gone before I could say anything. I sat down. I watched the waitstaff push through the swinging kitchen door about 18 inches from my left elbow. I watched the rest of the room fill up with well-dressed people who all seemed to know each other. I saw my son pose for photos with clients, with employees, with his wife, with her parents. Her father in a suit that probably cost more than my car. Her mother in a pearl necklace that caught the light every time she moved. I was not in any of those photos. I drank water. I ate the appetizers when they came around. I checked my watch more often than I should have. I'd driven 45 minutes to be there, and I was trying to remind myself that it was worth it, that it mattered that I was there. That even if I was sitting alone by the kitchen door, I was still his father, and I was proud of him, and that had to count for something. I was on my second glass of water when someone pulled out the other squeaky chair and sat down beside me. He was a heavy-set man, maybe 67 or 68, with silver hair and a dark suit, and the kind of easy, settled posture of someone who's been comfortable in his own skin for a long time. He set his drink on the table, bourbon, from the look of it, and glanced around the room without any particular expression. "Not exactly the best seat in the house," he said. I laughed. Couldn't help it. "No," I said. "It's not. Mind if I sit here a while?" I've been standing and shaking hands for about 40 minutes, and my knees aren't what they used to be. "Be my guest," I said. His name was Charles Whitmore. He told me that without ceremony, the way people from a certain generation introduce themselves. Just name, hand extended, eyes meeting yours directly. I told him mine. We shook hands. "You know the firm?" he asked, meaning the company my son had founded. "The founder's my son," I said. He raised his eyebrows slightly, then nodded. "Well, proud night for you then." "Yes," I said, because I was still trying to believe that. He asked me where I was from, and I told him Akron, and he said he'd grown up in Canton, which is about 25 miles east, and we spent a few minutes talking about Northeast Ohio the way people from that part of the country do, with a kind of rueful affection, like you're describing a difficult relative you still love. He asked what I'd done for work, and I told him about the paper mill, and he didn't flinch or change the subject, or give me that particular look I've learned to recognize when people decide you're not worth their full attention. He just asked how long it took to really understand the equipment, and when I told him 31 years, he smiled and said, "That kind of knowledge doesn't come cheap." I didn't know what he meant by that, exactly. But it felt good to hear. We talked for a while. He was easy to talk to. The kind of man who asks real questions and then actually listens to the answers instead of just waiting for his turn to speak again. I found myself telling him things I hadn't planned to say, about my wife passing 4 years earlier, about how strange it still felt to cook for one person, about how I'd driven up from Akron tonight in my old Malibu because I wanted my son to know I was in his corner. "Has he come over to say hello?" Charles asked. "Not yet," I said. "He's busy." Charles looked across the room toward my son, who was now laughing loudly at something one of the clients had said. Then he looked back at me and didn't say anything for a moment. "Tell me something," he said. "What did you think of his pitch? The business model?" I blinked. "He used to practice it at my kitchen table," I said. 3 years ago. I heard it so many times I could give it myself." Charles smiled at that, a genuine one. "He's got good instincts," I said, because that was true. Always did, even as a kid. He could read a situation fast. "I'll give him that." "He does," Charles said. "He does have good instincts." He said it in a way that sounded like he was confirming something he already knew. My son's wife came back around then. She was moving through the room with that same managed hostess energy, touching people's arms, laughing at the right moments, keeping everything running smoothly. She glanced over at our table, and I saw her expression change. Just for a second. Just a flicker. But I've been reading faces for 64 years, and I know what I saw. She recognized Charles. She excused herself from whoever she'd been talking to and came over immediately. Her whole posture shifted, straighter, more careful. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, and there was something new in her voice that I hadn't heard her use with me. "I didn't realize you were. We'd been hoping to introduce you to. Can I get you anything? There's a table reserved closer to." "I'm fine right here," Charles said pleasantly. "Your father-in-law has been keeping me company. Good man." My daughter-in-law looked at me. I looked at her. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "Of course," she said finally, and smiled. "Of course he is." She moved off quickly. I watched her find my son across the room and lean in close to say something. I saw his expression go still. He looked over at our table, at Charles, then at me. He excused himself from his group and came over in about 30 seconds. "Dad," he said, and his voice had a different quality now. Careful, controlled. "I should have come over sooner. It's been a big night." "I know," I said. "It's fine." "Mr. Whitmore," my son said, turning to Charles with a practiced smile. "Sir, I'm so glad you could make it. I was hoping to find time to sit down with you this evening. I wasn't sure if you'd had a chance to." "Your father and I have been having a fine conversation," Charles said. "You've got a good one here. Did you know he could recite your original pitch?" "Heard it at his kitchen table," he says. My son looked at me. Something crossed his face that I couldn't quite name. Not shame. Not quite. Something more like being caught off balance. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He was always there." "Sit down," Charles said, pulling out a third chair from an empty table nearby. "Let's all talk for a few minutes." My son sat. What came out over the next 20 minutes, piece by piece, was something I hadn't known. Charles Whitmore was not just a guest. He was the chairman of an investment group out of Columbus, one that my son had been courting for the better part of a year. They managed close to $800 million in assets. A partnership with them would be the biggest thing my son's firm had ever done, by a significant margin. Charles hadn't committed yet. He'd come to this event to get a sense of the firm's culture, he said, of the people, of whether this was an organization he wanted to be associated with. My son had known this. My daughter-in-law had known this, and they had sat me at a folding table by the kitchen door and left me there alone for 2 hours. I didn't say any of that out loud. Didn't need to. I could see my son working through it in real time, behind his eyes, the way he used to work through math problems as a kid, that specific focused look, recalculating. Charles turned to me at one point and said, "What would you say your son's biggest strength is?" I thought about it. I didn't want to give him a polished answer. I just said what I actually believed. "He doesn't quit," I said. "When something goes wrong, he adjusts. He doesn't panic, and he doesn't fold. I watched him do it when he was 12 and his little league team lost in the finals, and I've watched him do it ever since." I paused. He's better at the suit part than I ever was. But that thing in the middle of him, that doesn't quit, that came from somewhere real. Charles nodded slowly. And where did it come from? His mother mostly, I said. And maybe a little bit from watching me go to the same job for 31 years and never complain about it. The table was quiet for a moment. Accountability, Charles said. That's the rarest thing. Genuinely rare. He looked at my son. I'd like to schedule a formal meeting, early February if that works. My son nodded. His voice came out steadier than I expected. Absolutely, yes, thank you, sir. Charles stood up, shook both our hands, and moved off to find someone else to speak with. My son and I sat there for a moment. Dad, he said. Don't, I said, not angry, just clear. He was quiet. I drove 45 minutes to be here, I said. I ironed this shirt last night. I'm 64 years old, and I still went out and bought new shoes because I wanted to look right for you. I looked down at my hands on the table. I wasn't asking to be at the head table. I wasn't asking for a speech or a toast. I just wanted to be somewhere that wasn't next to the kitchen door. My son didn't say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I let her talk me into it, he said. She thought she was worried about how it would look with the investors, and I didn't push back. I know, I said. That's not. He stopped. That's not an excuse. No, I said. It's not. He looked at me with something I recognized from when he was very young. That expression he'd get when he knew he'd done something he couldn't undo, and he was deciding whether to try anyway. I'm sorry, Dad. I looked at him for a long moment. He meant it. I know my son. He doesn't say things he doesn't mean. That part's always been true. I know you are, I said. He moved his chair a little closer. We stayed there talking for the rest of the evening. He brought me a real plate of food from the dinner service. He introduced me to 3 of his employees. Good people, I thought. The kind of young professionals who look you in the eye when they shake your hand. He never said anything to his wife right then, in the room, but I noticed her watching us from across the hall, with an expression I couldn't fully read. We didn't resolve everything that night. You don't. These things don't get fixed in one conversation at a party by the kitchen door. But something shifted, the way things shift when one person finally says what's true, and the other person finally hears it. A week later, my daughter-in-law called me. She talked for about 10 minutes. Some of it was justification, some of it was explanation, but somewhere in the middle of it there was something real. A moment where she stopped performing and just said, I think I treated you like you didn't matter, and you do. You matter to him, and you should matter to me. It wasn't perfect. It was enough. Charles Whitmore's group signed a preliminary agreement with my son's firm in early February, just like he'd said. My son called me the day it was finalized. He didn't call his wife first. He called me. Had to tell you first, he said. You were there when I was practicing at your kitchen table. I remember, I said. You fell asleep twice, he said. You were on your 14th run-through, I said. I'm 64, not superhuman. He laughed. It was his real laugh, the one from before he got good suits and clients, and a firm with 40 employees, the one I'd been missing. I still drive the 2009 Malibu, still got the cracked dashboard. I've been meaning to fix it, and I probably won't. Some things you keep the way they are because they're honest. And some things, if you're lucky, you fix before it's too late.